Mafia boss saved a dying waitress after a fierce robbery. He made them suffer. She was crawling, knees dragging through her own blood, one hand reaching for the service window, the other pressed against her ribs where something inside had shifted in a way that meant she was running out of time. The diner was locked from the outside. The register was empty. The men were gone. Marin Solis was going to die on the floor of a restaurant that paid her $9.50 an hour. Then headlights swept across the glass. A black SUV. A man stepping out. He looked through the window and saw her reaching for nothing. He put his fist through the door. Marin Solis was left for dead on a diner floor by men who came for money that didn't exist. And the man who broke through that door runs Charlotte from the shadows. Subscribe and hit that bell, because what he does to the men who did this will shake you. Marin had been closing Howes alone every night for 7 months. The diner sat on a dead stretch between the interstate and Charlotte's warehouse district, the kind of place where truckers stopped for coffee at 3 a.m. and nobody asked your name. She worked the 6 p.m. to 2 a.m. shift, sometimes longer if the morning girl called out. $9.50 an hour, plus tips that averaged $30 on a good night. She'd been working since she was 16, grocery stores, cleaning offices with her mother, a laundromat that paid cash under the table. Marin didn't know what rest looked like. She knew what rent looked like. She knew what overdue looked like. Rest was a luxury for people whose lives had margins. She was 25 years old. Her mother had died 2 years ago, cancer that went untreated too long because insurance was something that happened to other people. And by the time the emergency room couldn't turn her away, the disease had already made its decision. Her older brother Asa had borrowed money to cover the final hospital bills. $15,000 from a man whose name Marin didn't know at the time. Asa disappeared 14 months ago. No note, no call, just gone, like a door had closed behind him and erased the hallway. Marin filed a missing persons report. Nothing came of it. She spent 14 months calling shelters, checking hospitals, searching faces on the street. Her brother had vanished inside a city of 900,000 people, and no one was looking for him except her. Howes was owned by a man named Galt Henning, 53, drinker. The kind of boss who showed up late smelling like last night and expected the diner to run itself. Marin covered for him constantly, opening when he was too hungover, balancing the register when his math didn't add up, staying late to clean because the morning crew wouldn't do it. She didn't complain because complaining required energy she'd already spent, and because Galt was the only employer in 2 years who hadn't found a reason to fire her. That night, 1:47 a.m., 3 men walked into Hal's. They didn't sit down. The first one went straight for the register. Marin opened it without being told. She put the cash on the counter, $312, and stepped back with her hands visible. Compliance was survival. She'd learned that long before this moment, but $312 wasn't what they came for. The tallest one grabbed her by the collar and shoved her toward the back. The safe, where is it? There was no safe. There was no weekend deposit, Marin told them. They didn't believe her. She told them again. The pistol grip hit her temple before she finished the sentence. She went down. The floor was sticky with fryer grease and smelled like burned coffee. A boot connected with her ribs. Once, twice, 3 times. Something cracked. Something shifted. She tasted copper. Her vision went white at the edges. One of them kicked her again after she'd stopped moving, the way a man kicks a thing he's already decided isn't a person. They left, locked the door from the outside. The neon "open" sign buzzed above her like a joke. Marin lay behind the counter for what felt like hours, but was probably 4 minutes. The pain in her side was hot and spreading. Not the sharp ache of broken ribs, but something deeper, wetter. The kind of damage that happens on the inside where you can't press a towel against it. She needed to move. She needed help. She needed someone to know she was here. She crawled, knees through blood, one hand reaching, the other holding herself together. She made it to the service window and pressed her palm against the glass. A bloody handprint, a signal to no one. Headlights, Rune Casper's black SUV pulled into the back lot at 2:11 a.m. He was 37 years old, and he ran Charlotte's Underground with the methodical patience of a man who'd learned early that noise gets you killed and silence gets you everything else. He used Hal's back lot for late-night exchanges, neutral ground, no cameras, empty after closing. He was early. The lot was deserted. But the diner lights were on and the front door was locked, and something about the stillness was wrong. He looked through the glass. He saw the blood. He saw the handprint. He saw a woman lying behind the counter with one arm reaching toward a window and the other pressed against ribs that were no longer doing their job. He put his fist through the door. Glass shattered across his forearm. He didn't notice. He crouched beside her. She flinched, hard, automatic, the full-body recoil of a woman whose instincts had been rewritten by violence. He stopped, waited, let her see his face. "I'm going to pick you up," he said. "Tell me if I'm hurting you." He lifted her. She cried out. He adjusted his grip and carried her to the SUV, one hand on the wheel, the other holding a towel against her head wound while he called his physician. Maren drifted. The world went soft and gray. At one point, she opened her eyes and saw his face, jaw tight, focused, blood running down his forearm from the shattered door. "You're bleeding," she whispered. He didn't look down. "I know. We'll deal with mine later." His physician, Bridger, worked on Maren for 4 hours. Ruptured spleen, fractured skull, 4 broken ribs, internal bleeding. Bridger told Rune another 30 minutes and she'd have been gone. Maren woke in a bed she didn't recognize. Clean sheets, low light, bandages she didn't apply. The door to the room was open. She could hear a chair creaking softly in the hallway. Someone sitting outside her room. Not inside, outside, guarding her sleep without crossing the line. She stared at that open door and listened to the quiet presence on the other side of it. And for the first time in years, she closed her eyes without bracing for what morning would bring. 3 days passed inside Rune Casper's house like weather she didn't trust. Maren kept to the guest room mostly, sleeping in fits, waking to pain, counting the exits out of habit. Front door, back door, 2 windows on the first floor. The math of escape was so deep in her wiring she did it in rooms where no one was chasing her. On the second day, she tried to walk to the kitchen alone. Her ribs caught fire halfway down the hallway and her knees buckled. Rune appeared from nowhere, one hand steadying her elbow, not grabbing, not gripping. "You've got 4 broken ribs," he said. "The kitchen isn't going anywhere." She looked at him with the expression of a woman who'd been carrying herself for so long that someone else's hand on her arm felt foreign. "I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to right now." She let him help her to the kitchen table. She didn't thank him. He didn't wait for it. 4th morning. Maren's hands were still bandaged, knuckles split, fingers swollen. The damage from the diner floor ground into her skin. She stood at the stove trying to crack an egg into a pan because sitting in bed waiting for someone else to feed her made her feel like a patient, and she wasn't a patient. She was a person. The egg slipped, hit the floor. Yolk spread across the tile in a slow yellow pool. Maren froze. Not because of the mess, because dropping things had always meant something was coming. Galt docked her pay when she broke a plate at the diner. Her father, before he left when she was 12, had a temper that could be triggered by a spilled glass of water. The reflex was older than memory. She stood there, shoulders braced, staring at a broken egg on a kitchen floor, waiting for the punishment. Rune walked in. He saw the egg. He grabbed a towel from the counter, crouched down, wiped it up, stood, cracked 2 more into the pan. Didn't look at her. Didn't comment. Cooked breakfast like nothing had happened. Maren watched him from across the kitchen. Something in her shoulders loosened 1 degree. 1 single degree. But she felt it. That afternoon, Rune sat across from her at the table and opened a folder thick enough to stop a door. "The robbery wasn't random," he said. He laid it out. His people had traced the 3 men within 48 hours. They worked for a loan shark named Prosser, who operated Charlotte's debt collection underground with the protection of a corrupt police lieutenant named Shears. Prosser sent them to Hal's because the diner's owner, Galt Henning, owed him a debt he couldn't cover. Galt told Prosser there was a $20,000 weekend deposit in a back safe. There was no safe, no deposit. Galt lied to buy himself time, and he bought it with Marin's body. He scheduled her for the closing shift deliberately. He knew Prosser's men would come. He knew she'd be alone. Marin's palms flattened against the table. Galt sent them. He sent them knowing you'd be the only person in that building. The silence that followed was heavy enough to press the air from the room. Marin sat with it. The man she'd covered for, opening his diner when he was too drunk to stand, cleaning his kitchen, working his shifts, had pointed 3 armed men at her, like she was a locked door between him and another month of breathing. She didn't cry. Something shifted behind her eyes. Cold. Quiet. A rearrangement of everything she thought she understood about the last 2 years. Not despair. Something with teeth. The evenings took on a pattern. Rune read in the living room while Marin sat on the other end of the couch working through documents his people had compiled. He brought her coffee without being asked. Black, no sugar. She noticed the scar on his forearm from the diner door, still raw, never treated. She caught herself watching him, the patience in his hands when he turned pages, the way his jaw carried tension even at rest. She looked away. He caught her every time. Neither said a word about it. One night she couldn't sleep and found him in the kitchen at 1 a.m. with a cold cup of coffee and a book. She sat across from him. He made her tea without asking. The silence between them was easy, warm, the kind that doesn't ask you to fill it. She wrapped her hands around the mug and felt something thaw behind her sternum that had been frozen so long she'd stopped noticing the cold. A week after the robbery, Galt appeared on the local news, standing outside Hal's diner, talking to a reporter about the terrible incident. His voice cracked when he said Marin's name. He called her, like family. He wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The anchor offered sympathetic nods. The segment ended with a tip line number and a community fundraiser Galt was organizing in Marin's honor. Marin watched from the living room. Something crystallized. Not broke, crystallized. The man on that screen sent armed men to his own diner knowing she'd be there alone. He was performing grief for a woman he'd tried to sacrifice. He wasn't devastated. He was a costume. She wasn't the broken one. He was. She turned back to the files, went deeper, and the ground opened beneath her. Prosser's operation wasn't just loan sharking. People who owed him and couldn't pay were forced into labor in illegal warehouse operations across Charlotte's industrial district. Unpaid work, confiscated IDs, debts designed to inflate faster than any human could work them down. Lieutenant Shears kept the lid on. Anyone who tried to leave was arrested on fabricated charges and returned. Then Marin saw a name in the records and stopped breathing. Asa Solis, her brother. Borrowed $15,000 2 years ago. Current balance, $190,000. Rigged interest. Location, Warehouse 11, West Side Industrial Corridor. Status, active laborer. 14 months. Her hand covered her mouth. 14 months she'd searched. Shelters, hospitals, morgues. Her brother had been 12 miles away the entire time, trapped in a building she could have driven past 100 times without knowing. Everything she'd held broke open. She screamed. Not words, sound. The grief and guilt and rage of 14 months compressed into something that shook the walls. She put her fist through a cabinet door. Rune caught her hand before she did it again. Not gripping, steadying. When the storm passed, she was raw-voiced and trembling. He said, "Good. You have a voice. Use it." Marin wiped her face. Her eyes were red, but her jaw was iron. "I want my brother back. I want Galt in a cell. I want Prosser's warehouses emptied. And I want every person who ever shook that man's hand to see what he built on the backs of people who had no one to fight for them. The Charlotte Business Alliance annual dinner, 3 weeks out. Black tie event at the Mint Museum. Prosser, operating under his legitimate identity as Marsh Prosser, Charlotte real estate investor, was being recognized for community economic development. Lieutenant Shears was attending as an honored guest. Galt Henning had a table near the stage. 400 guests, full press, the governor. Marin intended to turn every screen in that room into a confession. Rune's tech specialist, Finch, deliberate, precise, the kind of woman who could breach a security system while finishing a crossword, held an event coordination contract with the Mint Museum through one of Rune's legitimate fronts. AV access 2 hours before the ceremony. 4 seconds to switch the feed. Marin built the evidence package. Prosser's debt records showing interest calculations engineered to trap, balances that grew faster than any person could work them down. Warehouse documentation, photographs, worker lists, names and faces of 43 people held in windowless buildings across Charlotte's industrial district. Lieutenant Shears's fabricated arrest records, charges invented to keep workers from leaving. Galt's referral payments, $2,000 per person fed into Prosser's system. 8 names from Hal's diner alone. And she went deeper into Prosser's files and found the piece that made her hands go still. Galt wasn't just a debtor, he was a recruiter. Employees who fell behind on rent, who needed pay advances, who were desperate. Galt introduced them to Prosser as a favor. He'd been doing it for 4 years. A pipeline running from the diner counter straight into the warehouses, built on the trust of people who thought their boss was helping them. Marin found her brother's referral paperwork. Galt's signature at the bottom. The man who employed her was the man who sold Asa into forced labor for $2,000, and the robbery night. It wasn't just a stalling tactic. If Marin survived, she'd be scared and broke enough to accept Prosser's help, feeding herself into the same pipeline that swallowed her brother. If she didn't survive, Galt would collect on a life insurance policy he'd taken out on every employee at Hal's, a policy Marin never signed. Her death had a dollar value. Galt had already calculated it. She added the referral documents and the insurance policy to the evidence package. Her hands were steady. 2 weeks before the gala, Rune's team extracted Asa, the warehouse on Charlotte's West Side corridor, disguised as a packaging facility, padlocked doors, no windows. 3 a.m. 12 workers pulled out, Asa among them. He came through the door of Rune's house looking like a man who'd been hollowed out and left standing by accident. Thinner, quieter, eyes carrying the weight of 14 months spent being told he was nothing more than a number on a ledger. Marin saw him in the hallway, and her knees gave. She grabbed him and held on, carefully, because his body looked like it might break if she squeezed too hard, fiercely, because 14 months of searching and praying and refusing to believe he was dead had earned her this moment. "I'm sorry, Mar," Asa whispered. "I'm sorry." "Stop," she said. "None of this was your fault." She held her brother and cried the way she hadn't since their mother's funeral. Rune stood at the end of the hallway, watching, and then quietly walked away. Some moments don't need a witness. They need space. Prosser discovered workers were missing. He activated Shears. Patrol cars circled Rune's territory. A raid on an east side property, thinly disguised, fishing for evidence. The window was narrowing. The night before the gala. Marin sat on the back steps of Rune's house. Charlotte hummed in the distance. Headlights and highway noise and the low electric pulse of a city that didn't know what was happening in its warehouses. Rune sat beside her, close enough to feel, not touching. "Ace is safe," she said, "but there are still people in those buildings." He nodded. "After tomorrow, will it be enough?" He looked at her. "You've already done more than anyone asked you to." "Nobody asked me. That's the point. Nobody asked any of us. That's why Prosser got away with it." Rune was quiet. Then he spoke in that low, unhurried way that meant the words were coming from somewhere he didn't usually open. "My mother cleaned boats, Rich men's yachts. My father drank what she earned and broke what he couldn't drink. He paused. She died because a broken jaw went untreated, because my father said hospitals cost too much. I was 14. I held her hand until the paramedics came. His jaw tightened. They were too late. Everyone was always too late. His hand found hers on the step. She laced her fingers through his. They sat until the city lights blurred and the night settled around them. Morning of the gala. Marin dressed in silence. Steel gray gown, not decoration, armor. Finch wired the earpiece. Asa stayed at the house with Rune's people. He hugged her at the door. Finish it, Mar. She walked downstairs. Rune was waiting. Dark suit, no tie. He saw her and went still. Didn't compliment her. Looked at her like she was about to take something apart and he wouldn't miss it for the world. She almost smiled. The Mint Museum. Marble, high ceilings, champagne, 400 guests. Marin entered on Rune's arm. Whispers moved through the room. People recognized him. Some recognized her. The waitress from the Robbery, the face from Galt's tearful news segment. She was supposed to be recovering. Instead, she walked through that room like she'd already won and was waiting for everyone else to catch up. Galt saw her first, his face drained. Prosser tracked Galt's gaze and found Marin. His expression didn't change, too controlled, but his glass tightened in his hand. Marin walked past Galt's table. She didn't speak. She looked at him once, one look carrying more weight than a sentence ever could, and kept walking. Prosser took the stage for his award. Mid-speech, the screens flickered, went dark, came back. Debt records, warehouse photographs, 43 names and faces, Galt's referral payments, Shears's fabricated arrests, Ace's debt, $15,000 inflated to $190,000, the life insurance policies, and audio. Galt and Prosser discussing the robbery night, clinical and cold, Galt's voice saying the words that would follow him into his cell. She's replaceable. File the insurance if she doesn't make it. Every camera turned toward the screens, and Marin stood in the center of the Mint Museum, unbroken, while the men who priced her life watched theirs collapse. The first face on the screen was Asa Solis. Not a mugshot, not a file number, a photograph from before. Smiling, arm around his sister at their mother's birthday, a man who looked like he still believed the world had a place for him. Beside it, his debt ledger. $15,000 borrowed to bury his mother with dignity. $190,000 owed 14 months later. The math displayed in clean, undeniable columns that showed exactly how the numbers were rigged. Interest compounding weekly, phantom fees added monthly. A balance designed to grow faster than any human being could work it down. 42 more faces followed, one by one. Name, photograph, original debt, inflated balance. 43 people who walked into Prosser's office carrying the weight of a medical bill or a missed rent payment and never walked out. Displayed long enough to be read, photographed, remembered. The warehouse photographs came next. Rows of cots, padlocked doors, a bathroom with no door, industrial lighting that never turned off. The faces in those photographs matched the names on the screen. Hollow-eyed, thin, standing in a windowless building 12 miles from a city that never noticed they were missing. Galt's referral payments, $2,000 per person. 8 names from Hal's Diner. Employees who came to their boss desperate and were handed to Prosser like inventory. Ace's referral paperwork with Galt's signature at the bottom. A man sold into forced labor by the same boss his sister worked double shifts to cover for. The life insurance policies. Every employee at Hal's. Taken out without knowledge or consent. Galt's name as beneficiary. The robbery night reframed. Not desperation. Calculation. Marin's death had a price tag. Galt had already done the math. Shears's fabricated arrest records, charges manufactured against workers who tried to leave, false warrants, invented violations, a badge turned into a deadbolt. The audio played last. Galt and Prosser's voices through every speaker in the Mint Museum. Recorded by Rune's team. A conversation about the night 3 men nearly killed a woman on a diner floor, discussed with the warmth of men reviewing a shipping invoice. Galt's voice, flat, familiar, the same voice that had called Marin, like family, on the evening news, saying the words that would define him for the rest of his life. She's replaceable. File the insurance if she doesn't make it. 400 people heard it. The room didn't gasp. It contracted. The silence was worse than noise. The silence of people processing something that couldn't be rationalized or explained away. Prosser tried. He turned toward a camera, mouth opening around a denial that had worked 100 times before in rooms where no one had evidence. These documents are... His own voice cut him off. The audio looped. The warehouse discussion played again. The mask collapsed. Galt didn't try. He sat at his table with his hands flat on the white tablecloth, staring at the screens with the expression of a man who'd just heard a door lock behind him for the last time. Shears bolted for the east exit. 2 FBI agents were already there, positioned since an anonymous evidence package arrived at the Charlotte field office that morning. He walked into them and stopped. The fight went out of him between one step and the next. FBI entered the main hall. 4 agents, calm, unhurried. Prosser was escorted from the stage. Galt was pulled from his chair, both cuffed in front of every camera. Both walked past 400 witnesses who'd been drinking champagne with them 20 minutes ago. The flashbulbs didn't stop. Marin stood in the center of the Mint Museum. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She breathed, deep, full, using every rib, even the ones that still ached from a diner floor 3 months ago. The first breath in years that didn't cost her anything. 6 months later, a converted warehouse on Charlotte's West Side corridor, one of Prosser's former operations, reclaimed through the courts. The padlocks were gone. The windows were new. A sign above the door read, "The Asa Solis Workers' Rights Center. Free legal aid and job placement for victims of labor exploitation." Founded by Marin Solis. She ran it with the same steadiness she'd brought to every double shift and every closing hour. Except now the work carried a weight that meant something beyond the next paycheck. She sat across from people who'd been trapped and used and thrown away, and she helped them find ground solid enough to stand on. She did it because no one had done it for her. She did it because someone should have done it for Asa. She did it because replaceable was a word she intended to bury. Asa was the first person through the door on opening day. Thinner, quieter, but standing. He answered phones. He helped new arrivals with paperwork. He did the steady, quiet work of a man rebuilding himself one small task at a time. Sometimes he looked at his sister across the room and shook his head like he still couldn't believe she'd found him. Prosser, 30 years. Labor trafficking, financial fraud, conspiracy. Galt, 18 years. Accessory to armed robbery, insurance fraud, 8 counts of trafficking facilitation. Shears, 16 years. Corruption, fabrication of evidence, obstruction. Rune walked into the center on a quiet morning. The coiled tension that had lived in his body was softer. He'd restructured, stepped back, investing in workforce development across Charlotte's industrial corridor. He found Marin in the kitchen. She turned to him. "That 4th morning at your house, I was trying to make breakfast. My hands were still wrapped. I dropped an egg." She paused. I froze, just stood there waiting, because dropping things has always meant something bad was coming. Her eyes were bright. "You walked in, didn't look at me, didn't say a word, cleaned it up, cracked 2 more into the pan, and made breakfast like nothing happened." She swallowed. "Every man I've known made broken things feel like my fault. You just cook breakfast." That's when the flinch started to loosen. That's when I knew. Rune stepped forward. Marin closed the distance. The kiss was hers, her choice, her timing. Not because he saved her, because he broke through a diner door and never once made her feel like she owed him for it. because he cleaned up a broken egg and showed her that small accidents don't always mean punishment is coming. A county holding cell. Galt Henning on a thin mattress, plexiglass TV. The anchor's voice. The Asa Solis Workers' Rights Center celebrated the placement of its 100th client today. Founder Marin Solis spoke alongside her brother, calling the center proof that no one is replaceable. Replaceable. The word landed like a verdict delivered by his own mouth. His hand found the remote. He turned it off. The cell went quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't pass. He sat in it, and he lived with it. Marin Solis was left to die on a diner floor by men sent by a man she trusted. She crawled toward a window with one hand, reaching for nothing. Headlights found her. A stranger broke through a door. He didn't save her because he was good. He saved her because he knew what it means to hold someone's hand and arrive too late. He wasn't too late for Marin. And Marin wasn't too late for Asa. And what she built from the wreckage will outlast every man who tried to price her life and found out it was worth more than they could afford. If this one hit somewhere you didn't expect, don't hold it in. Drop a comment and tell us what you'd build from the wreckage. Share this with someone who needs to hear that being called replaceable by small men doesn't make it true. Subscribe, ring that bell, and be here when the next one drops. It burns hotter. We'll see you there.